Welcome to Camp Programming by Design, where we discuss the power of intentionality in what we do.
If we look closer, the magic of camp isn't usually an accident, it's architecture.
I'm Ariella. I go by she, her.
And I'm Chris, and I use he, him.
And we are about to dive deep and explore the impact of camp experiences and how we can infuse intentionality into every moment, from the high energy activities to the downtime, the meal times, and everything in between.
And our goal is to stop just doing program and start designing for it. Because when we program for purpose, we build resilient communities that can change the world.
Please take a minute to subscribe, share, and rate this podcast. And don't forget to check out our show notes at gocamp.pro/camp programming by design. Let's get to work.
In our last episode, we talked about how camp is not all about having fun. And when kids realize they're kind of outside of their fun zone, we sometimes hear the dreaded words, I'm bored. So if you are wondering what to do when you hear it, you know the answer is it's done by design. So Ariella, let's start with you. Do you think hearing I am bored is a bad thing at camp, or what thoughts crossed your mind when you hear I'm bored?
Okay, so this is a really deep question. I think sometimes we hear the words I'm bored, and sometimes you can even see it on a camper's face before they even say it, and you can definitely catch it. I think that kids these days, and adults too, I find myself in the same same situation. We don't always know how to describe what we're feeling. And a lot of times we go towards boredom as a generic, I don't love how I'm feeling, but I'm not really sure what to do about it. And I don't really know how I'm feeling. And blah, someone help me. So kids will say I'm bored and or have that bored look on their face, not necessarily when they are actually bored, but often at a lot of other times. It could be when they are feeling homesick, which they don't know what that word is even. It could be when they want to be participating, but they don't really know how to do that. It could be for a lot of different things, but I want to talk about that piece for a second. Kids in camp, or humans in general, really crave connection. And they want connection either with the counselor or with their friends. So saying I'm bored to the counselor kind of draws they just want attention from the counselor. It's much harder, and we know, like, this generation, adults included, myself included, it's hard sometimes to strike up a conversation with someone who is older and cooler than you, like a camp counselor. So sometimes saying I'm bored is that request for connection. And for other kids also, when if they want to connect with other kids, they could say I'm bored as a, like, hey guys, bring me into the circle. I'm here. Did you forget about me? There's another piece to it that I think is the same reason that they have this, like, uncomfortable feeling, but the reason isn't necessarily because of connection. It could be that they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. That could mean they don't know where their friends are. Maybe it's just like, okay, everyone's on the playground, and, like, but where's, like, my little group of friends that I want to go play with them? Or it could mean, like, I wasn't paying attention when you explained the rules of this game. Or I'm not so good at this game. Can you help me figure this out? There could be a lot of different reasons that anybody would feel this uncomfortable feeling, and the solution is wanting to be, I guess it's also connection, because they want to participate, but it's less, I think it's the same thing. At the end of the day, it's probably psychologically, it's probably the same thing. But I think the way we get there, the how part of it could look different.
I mean, I think what I was hearing what you were sharing is one of the first things to do when somebody says I'm bored is make sure that they're reading their own signal correctly, right? And I think this is one thing that's really interesting about camp is it is a slower environment sometimes than school or at home where everything is really, really planned out. So we get to experience more emotions in different ways. And because we experience more emotions, we have to figure out to do with those emotions. And I hadn't even thought about this thinking around boredom, that it could actually be a signal for a sign of not feeling connected to the thing, whatever the thing is that is happening, which I think, again, makes perfect sense in a world that is literally over programmed at every moment, right? We don't experience a lot of boredom. Most of us have a device that lives in our pocket that literally keeps us from not being bored ever. And so I think you enter a camp environment where you don't have that as a safety net and you have this experience and you don't know how to be present. So I love thinking about the question of I am bored. What could it be a signal for? Are there other things that you think it could be a signal for besides I don't feel present or I am looking for connection?
I mean, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. There's another thing that I thought of as you were saying that like we always have a phone in our pocket to kind of like save us from our boredom, which is we know I'm doing air quotes, is not actual boredom. But we're not so good at or we don't have as much practice communicating in person, human to human. So it sometimes does feel uncomfortable when we're not good at it and we're not so practiced at it. So we could often hear I'm bored when it's a lack of practice with communicating. I know I didn't answer your question, but that just kind of came to mind. Even kids that are like a group of friends I'm like picturing that are best friends with each other often are most of their communication is through their phone. And then when they're physically together, they're still on their phones because it's difficult. It's really difficult when you're out of practice. So we're kind of forcing this no phone zone. And then we need to be aware and design appropriately for now that we don't have phones, which is totally not what we planned on talking about today, but it's kind of just a different part of it.
I hadn't even thought about, right? So I was thinking of a phone as, again, something that is a constant simulation. But what you named, which is even more interesting to me, is it has changed the way we fundamentally communicate with each other, right? So it used to be two people talking, right? I talk to you, you say something back to me. Now we have the opportunity to self edit before we say the thing. And so that self editing gets in our brain and we think we have to be able to do that naturally. And so conversation can become really unwieldy, right? Like it is harder and more vulnerable, and you have to take more risks to even have a conversation where you haven't written it down first and edited it and thought about is am I taking the selfie from the right direction or whatever it is. Like live presence, and this has absolutely nothing to do with boredom, but exactly where I think we should have ended up, because I do think it all has to do with when you hear I'm bored, there's a flag, there's a signal there. And we have fundamentally shifted the way we communicate in a way that makes it harder for kids in the canoe to talk to each other, right? Part of
Yeah.
a lot of our programming at camp, even canoeing, there's a great example, right? So much of canoeing is communicating with the people with you. So much of fishing is sitting and thinking and waiting. So even though we're doing an activity, it can feel like boredom in a world where we don't know how to connect with the person next to us and talk about like, oh, here we're at fishing and isn't the lake beautiful right now? Or what bait are you using? Or how did you sleep last night? Right. So it's almost like we silo ourselves in this communal activity
Mhm. Mhm.
that then manifests itself as boredom because we don't know what to do with the dead air.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a couple more things that I think could be helpful in this boredom conversation. But I want to ask you first, before we get into that, what crosses your mind when you hear I'm bored at camp?
Yeah,
What's the first
I
thing that comes to mind?
the first thing that comes to mind, and I see this with my own kids too, is when somebody says they're bored, my first instinct is to say, that's okay. It's okay, right? It is an okay state to be in. I spent some time over the last couple of days really learning what happens in our brain when we become bored. And I am really excited to share, and I want to hear kind of your thoughts around this, is that we actually have in our brain like a different mode that we got that comes online when we get bored. It's called the default mode network. And it's kind of like when we're not getting hit with things, right? We have the chance. Again, maybe we're holding a fishing pole, but our mind is wandering. We're somewhere called our default mode network, which is also one of the best spaces to process memory, to have imagination, to engage in self-reflection, and even identity development. So boredom is actually a really natural space for us to do a lot of the things that give camp purpose, right? We talked about identity development and how important that is when we talk about camp environments and how people really have an opportunity to develop identity, especially young people, in ways that they don't at school. Now, I think the hard part here is kind of also what you're naming, in that if somebody becomes too bored, right, then they disengage because we also have this optimal arousal zone. So that's like enough stimulation to stay engaged, but not too much that they become overwhelmed. And we can do a lot when we're in that zone. Fortunately, the first thing that we have to do is allow that person to sit in discomfort because boredom is uncomfortable when it is not a practice. And often, because kids don't engage with it very much, they feel like they're going into a danger zone when they're bored. Like, oh my gosh, nobody likes me. I don't have any friends here. This is not going to be fun for the rest of the time we're here, right? It's that lower resilience threshold that we see, but it is discomfort. It is not a lack of safety, even if that person feels unsafe. And if you can help get them back in their zone of regulation, that's when we get to this treasure trove of skills that most kids aren't reaching towards because they are consistently engaged. So I think, again, I think of our fishing example, right? To make it a little bit more concrete, if the conversation with that kid at fishing can be like, well, tell me what boredom feels like for you. Do you want me to help connect you with your friend who's fishing right next to you? Do you design your fishing program so you intentionally talk about boredom before they get bored? So it's not as scary when it happens. So what is the front loading at the fishing program that allows kids to sit through that discomfort and get to the richness of that default mode network?
I'm in love with this. I think I've never been to a camp that had a fishing program that like gave enough time to be bored. There
Mhm.
was always like also something else going on, or it was like you out those places where you always catch a fish and it takes 2 seconds to catch a fish. So this is beautiful. This is really beautiful because you're talking a lot about like education that's just like really healthy for the individual that they definitely will take with them outside of camp. When you first started talking about this, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of like relearning. And we're going to have to like teach our entire parent body that at our camp, we say boredom is good. But when the campers really understand this, the way you described it before the fishing program starts, they really understand it. And then they can go home and be proud of their boredom and tell their parents that, what they learned about what to do when you're sitting quietly. So there's so many extra benefits to really thinking about what the activity is and what we want to happen during that activity. And it's a fishing program is not the goal of it is not to catch a fish. The goal is a lot of things, but right now for me, the goal is to learn about yourself. Like for me to sit and learn about myself. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I actually I do a lot of fishing, and I started this last summer, and I go fishing every Friday with my father-in-law, who's my very good friend, and it was hard at first. Ariella, it was so hard at first because I mean, I have a busy brain. I am constantly doing something. I'm constantly on my phone. If I'm not on my phone, I'm reading something, like I keep myself very engaged. And the first couple of times, I really had to say, like, just stick with it. Just stick with
Yeah.
it. And I'm grateful to say that this Friday, tomorrow, is going to be the first fishing Friday of the season, and I can't wait to get back to it now, because
Yeah.
I know that it really is like you have all of this space and time to look at the trees and listen to the birds. And I said, like I said, I go with my father-in-law, but we rarely speak to each other. We just coexist in the same space, and I have found the weeks that I do that, I'm better set up for success in the rest of the tasks that I do. Here's another really interesting piece of brain science that I learned is when we switch tasks, right? Like when our brain is like, I got to go from this thing to this thing to this thing, it takes actual nutrients to do that. And just about 20 years ago, our brains were switching tasks every 3 minutes. Over the past 20 years, it's down to like every 30 seconds, our brain's looking for a new task. So think about the amount of
Yeah.
nutrients that it's literally taking from
Yeah.
your brain. And no wonder we're all tired by the end of the day and run out of words to say because we've done
Yeah.
this task switching all day long. And
Yeah.
kids are doing that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I remember hearing that. And for younger kids, it's even shorter than 30 seconds. The number I remember is 17 seconds for or maybe even 11 seconds, something like outrageously short. Yeah, that's exhausting. Yeah, yeah. So even just planning in advance when like if a camp doesn't even have a fishing program, what activities can you incorporate teaching the kids how to sit with their own thoughts?
And I think when we design for it, we have to be very intentional about the on-ramping, right?
Mhm.
That you don't stick a group of 7-year-olds in the wood and say, like, let's be quiet for 7 minutes. Like, they will hate it, right? But
Yeah,
like
yeah,
maybe we can do a minute
yeah, yeah.
and let
So
people sit in that. And again, like work through that discomfort
mhm.
and realize like that wasn't horrible. I could do this again tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. I actually remember a camp that I went to, and we had this activity at night in the woods and a bunch of like different little short things that they did with us. But one of the things that they did was we were all in one spot, and then one of the counselors went like, I don't know, it was probably like 20 feet ahead. And one by one, we walked in pitch black, we walked over there and just to experience walking alone in the dark in the woods. And it was obviously safe because we were in the campsite and it was just it was like really direct and not so far away. But I remember a lot of the kids, I think even like one of the older adults that was with us was terrified of that. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so even just that, it probably was like 30 seconds of being alone, but just creating that was so powerful.
And the dark is always a metaphor to me for the unknown, right?
Yeah.
Like, and kids and adults struggle with unknowns now more than ever because we can know, or we can at least think that we know
Yeah.
anything, right?
Yeah.
Kids don't have to wonder much of anything. And with my own kids, anytime they want to know something, they can look it up. And if they don't have one of their devices, they ask me to look it up on my device. And I've
Mhm.
kind of come to the conclusion that my best response is like, I'll do that, but give me 3 answers that you think it could be before I look it up.
Hmm.
to like get them to that place of curiosity that I feel like you probably are more likely to get to when you're in that default mode network that I was talking about. So
Hmm.
how walking in the dark, like that seems like such a simple action to put one foot in front of the other. And somebody could say, that sounds really, really boring. And that might be the coolest thing that somebody does at camp. I know for me, that experience of really being alone with my own thoughts, I almost never get there unless I have to. But if I'm challenged with it, I almost always love it.
So how do you think we create this balance, or we design this balance between unstructured, low stimulation time and excitement?
Yeah, I think you said the right word. I think it's balance. I think it's like, I don't know, I'm thinking about like really tactile things. Like if I'm looking at my camp schedule and I'm looking at all of the activities we're going to do in a day, like really trying to make sure there is a balance. And maybe you're taking a highlighter and you're highlighting all of the things that are going to be your all camp activity is going to be in pink because, whoa, that's going to be, whew, it's going to be overwhelming. Your time at the waterfront, let's go ahead and put that in pink. That's going to be overwhelming. Where are your green zones? Where are your downtime zones where we know that we're going to have to provide this support for boredom? I had never even thought about this, right? So many of the camps that I worked at, when it was rest hour, that was the best time for staff to have their time off.
Hmm.
What if we're doing that exactly wrong in that, like, actually, we need to resource our cabin or our group. So when boredom comes up, we have a safe adult who can help us hold that. Because even though it is a low stimulation time, campers almost need more support for that than the all camp where they're gonna just be wiling out, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I actually eh, have recently encountered a couple camps who are doing exactly what you described. They're doing an amazing job at it. That the counselor's downtime is during the campers' just regular activities that are standard, like we'll say soccer again. So during soccer, make sure your kids get to the soccer field. Okay. Make sure that, everyone knows where they're supposed to be and they've all gone to the bathroom already, done all their things, and they're set, and then go take some time off and then meet them back at the end of that hour. And then during quote unquote downtime is when the counselors are on, because it's such a unique time that they can just play quiet games together, have conversations, ask the kids about their siblings and their pets and those types of things, invent games together, dig in the dirt, things that they wouldn't normally be doing while they're doing their very busy schedule. So I think there are, thank goodness, a lot of camps that are doing that specific when there's downtime on the schedule, written on the schedule of rest time. I think there are some camps that are really doing that right.
What do you think about free time, right? Like a free play when there's just like open play and it's like everybody's in a field and they're doing a thing. That is a space where I see kids again thinking of it as a flag for a lack of connection are like, I am bored. I don't want to play soccer. I don't want to be on the climbing, like I don't want to do any of these things.
Mhm.
How do we design to hold boredom then?
Okay, so I think that type of boredom, when there's like chaos and it's not like quiet time for me to sit with my thoughts, that type of boredom is what I think I had more in mind when I was describing this need for connection. So in my experience, and I'm sure you have some really good thoughts on this, but in my experience, confronting those campers, not confronting, but talking to them, striking up conversation with them, and giving our counselors the tools to, like, a list of things to talk about with the campers during those times, and noticing it even before it happens, even before the camper comes up to you and says, I'm bored, noticing which campers need to be Hey, come, let's play this game with this group of kids, or hey, join us in our little conversation circle over here. I think identifying that and knowing what to do about it, and knowing that it's not necessarily that they're bored, it's that they don't know what to do. There's a lot of options, maybe too many options. They want to be brought into the circle. So I think equipping the counselors with it, and that it's not it's not a bad thing. It's not bad to be bored. And I think it really is a like reaching out and call for help. I want to connect. I want to be included. I want to talk to you. So for giving counselors conversation starters for the kids, recognizing that they just want to be involved in anything. Usually doesn't even matter. They just want to be involved in anything. We're just asking them, like, which activity that you see in front of you out of the 7 choices, which one is your most favorite? Which one is your least favorite? And then kind of figuring out how to make that happen. After speaking to a lot of camps, I often start when I speak to like the division heads or could be program directors, that those types of individuals. And I think for all adults in general, I say, what are our goals this summer? And oftentimes our goals are, I want to connect with my kids. I want to, there's a lot of like really beautiful goals, but I think, and what I've heard is we also want our own summer to be enjoyable for ourselves, for the people behind the scenes planning everything. We want it to be enjoyable for ourselves. And one way for that to happen is for our jobs to be easy. And when campers are saying they're bored, sometimes it feels like, "Ugh, this is so hard. My kids are always bored, and there's so many opportunities. There's so many things for them to be doing. Just go do something. And why are you always bored?" It makes our jobs feel very heavy and not easy. And camp is supposed to be light and fun, and it doesn't have to be difficult. It can be easy. And I think when we're prepared and we design our programs and our trainings in a way that we can recognize these thoughts where potential I'm bored might come up, and know when those times, like be prepared for those times and be prepared with responses. It makes all of the work much easier, and at the end of the day makes the kids happier. We know, right? Like the kids at the end of the day are gonna go home happy. They're gonna have made new friends. They're gonna have learned how to play new games. They're gonna learn about themselves. They're gonna be happy kids, fulfilled kids. And then we feel fulfilled. It's really like everything is perfect.
I love that. And I think that what that flagged for me is this feeling, almost this feeling that I used to get as a direct service staff member when I was a counselor is like, boredom is an emergency. And like somebody, watch out. Somebody said they're bored. I gotta solve this problem right now, or somebody's gonna get hurt. Right. That does not impact the case. And I hear what you're saying that I hadn't connected before is because it feels like you failed. You feel like I've put together this great experience, and if a camper says they're bored, I have failed. And if we could just like throw that away, like blow that idea away, just get it like a dandelion, poof, poof, like see you later. But like look at it as this opportunity, which is actually what it is.
Yes.
And instead of going into problem solving mode, help that camper connect to their own problem solve. You did it beautifully. Like instead of saying, well, then go do this, asking questions. What does boredom mean? Like why are you feeling uncomfortable right now? What of these activities sounds like fun to you? Is there any part of these activities that sound fun to you? So one of two things is going to happen. That kid is going to come up with a thing that they can go do, or they're going to get so bored with your philosophical questions, they're going to go do something else, right? And I think either one, they're getting to explore that feeling, and you're actually helping them problem solve out of the boredom problem, which isn't actually a problem. Okay, so here is my super, super tactile question. What if you're designing a staff training about boredom? What What kind of based on our conversation would you want your staff to absolutely know?
That's a really good question. I would design it in a way to give them the experience of boredom and talk about what are you feeling right now and like teach them exactly what you said, that it's hard in the beginning, and the more you do it, the better you are at it, and you'll find yourself craving it, craving this time that your brain has a chance to just like take a deep breath and get all the thoughts going. And it's not a bad thing. Boredom is not a bad thing.
I think we're designing a really great training here. And I think that the only other two things that I would add to that is that you have to do it with baby steps, right? Like you have to
Oh,
unrank
absolutely.
more boredom.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So again, don't make your kids sit in silence for a silly amount of time. And
Right.
the other thing that I think I would want to pull out and make sure is those tools that help staff connect campers with their own problem solves for boredom.
Mhm.
So instead
Yeah,
of
so
rescuing,
I think, like, that's a general campy thing, teaching kids how to problem solve on their own, and that could be, like, endless, right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so I think specifically with the boredom, probably number 1 thing to remember is that saying I'm bored isn't a bad thing, right? Like you said really, really perfectly, that we put so much time, money, energy into this program. How can you possibly say you're bored? It doesn't really mean they're bored. They're looking for something. And sometimes it could be we're just going to sit here and we're going to think about our thoughts and our feelings, or it's going to be come join our circle and have a chat with us and tell me about your dog. I'm remembering now also that we we feel really good, kids and adults feel really good when we've accomplished something. And I think this is a piece that we didn't talk about, that sometimes when we're challenged with something, if it's too difficult, we default to that on board. When what we really mean is this is really hard, in not in a not in a sense of what we said with, like, connecting, or just, like, "This activity is too hard for me." It could be in the art room, this is hard. Art is not easy and enjoyable for everybody, and often kids say they're bored in art. Like, for some people, like, how can you possibly say you're bored in art? Go, the opportunities are endless in here, go paint. But for some kids, it really is a challenge for them. And when they feel like I'm not good at this, they humans say get that uncomfortable feeling. So I think that's another piece of it, is sometimes it's a call for help. Help me through this challenge that I find difficult. So I think that's another thing for counselors to recognize, that it's not necessarily that you don't like art. It could be that you feel that you're not confident in what you're doing, and they need a little bit of a push in one direction or another.
I love that. And I think the thing that sparks for me is this idea that it's also some deep unlearning that we have to do, both for our kids and adults, which is unlearning that everything has to be productive, right?
Yeah.
If you go fishing and you don't catch a fish, you still went fishing. But
Yes.
somebody, right? We are like kind of persuaded to think that unless we catch the fish, which almost always we're going to just release back into the wild, right? Like I don't think there's a lot of camps. I'm not saying there's none that are using fish to feed the campers, right? Like there is nothing wrong with having a bad art project. There's nothing wrong with not catching a fish and not winning in kickball. That it is a zero sum. You actually lose nothing, but you can sit in that and like realize that that wasn't the thing that you thought you were producing was actually not the
Mhm.
purpose at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think this is reminding me also that a lot of times when kids say they're bored and we don't know what to do with that information, we kind of just like push it off, ignore it. You're fine, go play, right? When we don't deal with when we don't have a good response to it, it often leads to behavioral problems that are totally unnecessary. And I think we can probably spend a whole other hour discussing behavior problems, but I think this is definitely a solution to most behavior problems is catching the boredom before it surfaces and realizing what we can do for our kids to help them feel successful, help them feel connection, help them feel like they can do challenging things and they don't have to always catch a fish at the end of the day.
I love that. I love this conversation. I learned so much. Thank you. So, thank you to all of our listeners. If today's episode sparked an idea, don't let it fade out. Share it with a coworker or let us know about it. We'd love for you to reach out and share your design ideas or questions with us. So, you can text us using the link at the top of the show notes.
And you can find me on Instagram at Leadership Lioness.
And you can find me at Chris at tqamp.com.
And please be sure to tell your friends about what you heard today. And please, again, take a second to subscribe, share, and rate this podcast. And don't forget to check out our show notes at gocamp.pro/camp programming by design.
Camp Programming by Design is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcast.
Thank you again to our producers and the entire Go Camp Pro team. And again, to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today.
And remember, the best camp moments happen by design.